Warning. Disillusioned Podcast covers distressing themes such as coercive control, domestic violence, sexual assault, suicide, abuse, and human trafficking. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Disillusioned Podcast. I'm your host, Ari Sherwood. Today, I have maybe a little bit more chill of an episode for you guys. The last couple of weeks have been pretty rough. I have a genetic condition called hereditary neuralgic amyotrophy, and a couple weeks ago, probably about 3 weeks ago now, I started getting this flare-up in my left shoulder, which is essentially it's neuropathy, right? It hurts so fucking bad, and it can cause paralysis and just numbness and all these different things, right? So I had no episode last week. I was just out for the count, but this experience that I've been going through the past couple weeks has me in this, I guess, sort of reflection on, having this rare genetic condition and growing up evangelical. And, the connections here, when you think about cults and high control religions and people with, chronic illnesses or disabilities or, any of those sort of things. And what are the implications for these people when they are involved in cults or high control religions, right? So for those of you who have not been keeping track of my story, I grew up evangelical. I was raised, in this belief system that was very, very strict, it's evangelical Christianity, it's, you don't have anything to do with the world, it's homeschooled till 3rd grade, all that shit, right? So I have this genetic condition since I was a child, and, it runs in my family. So my sister has it as well. We had this at a very young age. I was probably 4-ish when I had my first flare up, and I have a memory from that night because I remember waking up in the middle of the night and I couldn't move my arm and going to my parents' room crying Mom, Dad, I can't move my arm. And I remember my mom being oh my God, Ari has it. She's got the disease, and I don't even remember anything after that. It's something that was in my home is just very normalized, right? It was very matter of fact. This condition runs through our family. It's something we're going to have to deal with in life, but it was just very normal. And I never recall ever seeing a specialist, right? I never saw a specialist. I grew up seeing physicians, family physicians, urgent care doctors. It was mostly pain management stuff, right? So I don't think my parents really knew how to, I don't think my mom, really knew, how to really deal with this condition at that point in time. So when you think about it, though, they were out of this evangelical group by the time I was born, but they were still, in these beliefs, right? So, in that evangelical group, they had nothing to do with the medical world, right? They had midwives, they don't believe in medication. They don't believe in mental illness, none of that stuff, right? So, and they believe in suffering, right? So, you gotta think from being in this group with this perspective on healthcare, and then going into the medical world, my mom today has tons of doctors, right? She's all for it now, but there's this transition there, I think, going from being like holistic, no medications, no nothing, no doctors, to, how do we treat this condition that my child is dealing with, right? And so, I never met a doctor growing up who even had ever heard of my condition. So, and I think it's hard enough for people with rare conditions as it is not being from like a cult or a high control religion, because, it's hard enough to find a good doctor. But, thinking about how my parents, never did really like go that route, right? Like they never like took me to the best doctors and really tried to get answers. And then moving forward in life, in my early 20s, I had married a cult leader and I was in a cult in Tennessee, and thinking about my flare up in Tennessee, I had several flare ups. One in particular, I was pregnant with my son and I was having this just awful flare up. It was just so painful. You think, my husband's Jesus Christ, he's a healer, so I don't need any meds. I don't need a doctor. I don't need anything, right? Because we're holistic, right? Like, so, it didn't take long for Jeff to realize that he was not able to heal me or make me feel better in any way, eventually actually suggesting maybe I should get on some meds. But then, like, when you think about it, it's like the medication was like a last resort thing when after all else failed. So I'd been suffering for how long at that point as it was, right? I had a midwife deliver my baby. I didn't do the doctor thing at that point in time. I didn't see a specialist for my condition until I was 26 years old, until the first time I dealt with actual paralysis, which took my hands and wrists out for a whole year and a half. I was in splints. I couldn't move, and it's so hard to find a good doctor. Like I said, in order for me to find a doctor, like a good fucking doctor who knows about my condition, I literally had to go to University of Michigan ER and, get in there. And as soon as they saw my hands, you almost feel like a spectacle in a way. You're like a medical phenomenon, right? That they never thought they would ever see in their lives. All these doctors at the ER. So you're sitting in the room. And I had doctors like peeking in, like just stopping in, introducing themselves. They're not my doctor, to see me. They just wanted to like actually see my hand. They wanted to witness this in person. Like that's how rare and insane it was. And at the time I was 26, peak physical condition, strongest I probably will ever be in my life. And, it was shocking even for the doctors to see what condition I was in, right? So like think 26 years, finally find this great doctor, finally find one of the best, who knows everything about my condition, inside and out, probably never thought he would ever see it, and there I walk in. So, when you think about these things and you look at the way, a lot of cults do run this way, okay? Like they do, like you don't have doctors, they don't believe, a lot of these groups, they don't believe in medication. Like they're not going to put you into the mainstream anything. If anything, it seems to be a theme of distrust for the medical system, right? And, what are the implications of this on like these like children with rare diseases or just any diseases? When you think about these high control religions and cults, don't allow blood transfusions, don't allow any medical intervention, don't believe in life-saving medical procedures, right? And I can imagine like people die, kids die, but not only do they die, but they fucking suffer, in the big picture of all these things. Like, do people think about this stuff? Like, what do they think about, like, being in a cult, having a disability, right? In a cult that doesn't believe in medical assistance in any way, or being raised evangelical where suffering is how you get to heaven. And, we don't intervene with God's will. So you're basically stuck to suffer. I believe in people's rights to choose. So, I believe in autonomy to make, decisions on your medical care, what you will and won't do, and all these things. I believe in that. I do. I believe people should have the right to choose, what they want to do with their bodies. I think where I draw the line here in this debate is, when we have children suffering, when you have children who can't get the help they need, who can't get medication that could relieve pain and suffering, who can't get life-saving blood transfusions, who can't get life-saving transplants and things like that. You know what I mean? The kids who could have been like how I was growing up with this rare condition. For me, I was seeing doctors, but they didn't know anything, but like not able to even like see doctors or really get any clear understanding of what you're going through and how to help it and how to treat it. And, that's where I draw the line. Like at that point, it's unnecessary human suffering. That should be illegal. That should not be, that shouldn't be a religious freedom because it infringes on the child's autonomy. Like, that child has the right to live. That child has the right to not have to fucking suffer like that. Like, that child has the right to medical care. That child has the right to a future, right? This is a really important topic that we need maybe more focus on. I feel like disabled people really get the shit end of the stick, even though like it's a huge population. People and everyone is going to be disabled one day. So what are the implications on people with disabilities in quotes? Maybe we will just kind of sit here and look into it a little bit. So I hope that you guys watch the videos on Spotify and YouTube. One person's religion is another person's cult or silliness. This is medical ethics here. Life itself is the highest priority, but some religions place a higher priority on specific religious tenets and prescriptions. Psychiatrists is most often called into these collisions to address questions of competence. See, like right here, when it comes to competence and consent, the standards for determining the acceptability or normalcy of a patient's beliefs seem to be the sharing of the religion by a larger population and the longevity of the patient's religious affiliation. These cases are always really interesting because they're basically talking about how, in the medical world, there are these ethical dilemmas that you come across every single day. And, there are extreme dilemmas too, because this is life or death, okay? What's going on is we have a conflict of values. And on one hand, you want to preserve the autonomy of the patient in making their own medical decisions, right? On the other hand, a doctor's literal job is to preserve life. And there are a lot of times where maintaining a patient's autonomy would actually mean losing their life. These are based on very personal beliefs of, the individual, the patient, when they refuse treatment or things like that, right? So Miss A had been delivered of twins by cesarean section 2 days earlier in a town some distance away. The infants were normal and thriving. The mother had seemed to tolerate the procedure well at the time. She had now suddenly crashed. Her blood pressure and pulse were approaching the level of hemodynamic shock. The presumptive diagnosis was internal hemorrhage. Okay. Let's see what's going on here. She asked that no blood be administered because she was Jehovah's Witness. She was too weak to press the point. and the staff was too concerned about her immediate survival to discuss it. Without articulating it, they took a position they would keep all options open and worry about philosophical discussions later. Later, her husband and her brother-in-law arrived. So they quickly thanked the staff and echoed her objection to the use of blood and blood products. They stressed she was a Jehovah's Witness. Her life's at stake. Under these circumstances, there's no alternatives, right? He was not inclined to let the life of a healthy young mother of 5 slip through his hands because of a completely irrational religious belief, conveyed by a woman in shock and 2 men who claimed to be relatives but whom he had never seen before. Right. For all he knew, the whole family had become Jehovah's Witnesses impulsively only weeks or even days earlier. So he had his own religious beliefs. He had gone to medical school, took a Hippocratic oath, and he just knew what his duty was. So he's going to do it, right? There's so much at risk. And in the medical world, this is literally why we have ethicists. A lot of PhDs in philosophy go and become medical ethicists and work at hospitals. They specialize in these kinds of things, in ethical thinking and moral reasoning and, problem solving. It gets confusing when you do have high control religions. About 300 children have died in the United States in the last 25 years. And so that was New York Times, January 20th, 2009. Child fatalities from religion-motivated medical neglect. To evaluate deaths of children from families in which healing was practiced in lieu of medical care, And that's what I'm saying, dude. It's the same with my whole experience. If, we had cancer, guess what? We're going to get frequency vibrational shiatsu tuning fork therapy, right? We're going to do flowing hands energy. We're going to do all of our holistic health treatments because we literally made these claims. Well, I say we collectively as a cult, but Jeff very specifically made these claims that it could cure cancer, right? Which is fucking bullshit. Wow, 172 children who died between 1975 and 1999. Criteria for inclusion were evidence that parents withheld medical care because of reliance on religious rituals and documentation sufficient to determine the cause of death. Jesus. 140 fatalities were from conditions for which survival rates with medical care would have exceeded 90%. Yeah. When faith healing is used to the exclusion of medical treatment, the number of preventable child fatalities and the associated suffering are substantial and warrant public concern. Existing laws may be inadequate to protect children from this form of medical neglect, right? Think growing up in a cult or, and not having a disease or having something wrong with you and not being able to access medication or doctors or, any help at all. Michigan child's death puts spotlight on clash between medicine and religion. The case of a Michigan couple charged in the death of their 10-month-old daughter is bringing to light a debate about withholding medical care because of religious beliefs. Damn, they were charged with felony murder and first-degree child abuse after their daughter Mary died from malnutrition and dehydration. The parents said they didn't seek medical help for their daughter because of their religious beliefs, so they declined to define their religion. Probably because it's a fucking cult. Thinking about it from this perspective is actually kind of shocking. For me, just as someone who grew up, with the condition that I have and not having a solid good doctor in my life, right, or anything like that, and really thinking about just beyond me, all these kids, man. Could you imagine being a kid? I am lucky because it could have, because obviously my mom took me to the doctors, right? They may not have been specialists, but they certainly treated me, and took care of me the best they knew how. So I definitely got treated for my condition, I couldn't even imagine having been, still in that like them being in that situation, or like growing up in the cult situation and having that kind of fucking pain and not being allowed to use medical care or, see a doctor or anything, or, can't get any pain meds, steroids, like diagnosis, nothing. Like, that is abuse. Like, say it for what it is. Call it what it is. That is abuse. No child should have to suffer like that. That's insane. And this discussion on cults and high control religions goes so beyond, what you realize when you really get into the big picture of everything wrong with it, and this, I think, needs way more attention, like children having access to medical care. So members of an Australian religious group have gone on trial accused of killing an 8-year-old diabetic girl by denying her medical care and offering prayer instead. Like, are you fucking kidding me right now? It really is just so awful how this shit goes down and how, dangerous this shit is. And belief is so extremely fucking powerful. It is something that drives people to do insane things, literally parents allowing their children to die. And the thing is that those parents, like, I doubt that they're sitting there thinking they're doing anything wrong, right? Like, they're not thinking that way. They're thinking they're doing the best thing they possibly could do for their child according to their belief system. There is an episode on South Park about this issue, and I thought that was a great episode, actually, because I thought, they hit the nail on the head, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, when it came to religion and medicine. I think at the end of it, it was Kyle says this whole speech about how, what if it's the case that medicine is a part of what God's doing, right? It was basically what he was saying. And what if actually it was the way in which God offered you a solution or an answer to your prayer was this medical treatment? And I'm like, damn, right. Like, why are we sitting here thinking that medical treatments are inherently bad? I, for one, appreciate everything about my doctors and, my medical treatments and those kinds of things. Like, it's not a bad thing, and it's crazy that we have this, we're so advanced in medicine and we have all of these treatments available and all these different things available for the public, and that people wouldn't, think that was a good thing, right? Like, people wouldn't take advantage of stuff like that. But it's like scary too to start going to a doctor when you believe that way. Like, and I think for people leaving a cult, I'm sure things like medical care and stuff like that is probably a real interesting thing to navigate, just like every other part of adjusting to life after leaving a cult. I just kind of want to touch on it because just going through this had me really thinking about the implications and how this affects people, with medical conditions when they're caught up in a cult or a high control religion. I think it's so sad. No one should ever have to suffer like that, ever. We're going to come back to this topic later on once I'm feeling more alive and energized, I think, to go down this road. I'm just not 100% yet. I'm getting there. I'm doing my best with my flare up, but But, I'm happy to do this, happy to record it. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining me and watching the Disillusioned Podcast. And I will see you next time.